All right, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the first ever virtual edition of the Pinelands Short Course. My name is Paul Lakin, and I'm here with Joel Mott, and we both work for the New Jersey Pinelands Commission. I want to first thank Stockton University, our partner, for helping us to arrange today's program. And I want to thank our 5 panelists who are here with us today. This is the 32nd annual Pinelands Short Course. And over the years, we've heard from a number of attendees who have told us they would like to spend more time with our presenters. And that's exactly what we're here to do today. Joel, do you have any comments you would like to add to that as Ted gets prepared?
I just want to welcome everybody. You know, we've had a rough last year or so, and it's great to see the response we've had, and so many people are interested in short course. And once we get back to a little more of some type of normality, we'll be back in our regular setup. But we figured we would try something new, and so this is kind of an experiment. So bear with us. We're got to use the technology, and so as long as the technology works, everything will be fine. But if we have a little blip, I apologize in advance, but we'll do the best we can.
That's right, and we'll take questions at the end of the session. And we would ask that for the questions that you can send in via chat, that you seek to direct them to particular presenters. That would be very helpful.
We'll just a heads up too, we'll filter through. We probably won't ask every question, but I bet there's going to be a lot of ones that are very similar. So we'll do our best to cover all the bases with questions coming through the chat. So if we miss you in the visual question, that's a possibility, but we'll try to make sure we get a good summary of all the questions that come in.
Thanks.
Okay, I think we're ready. Ted, you ready?
Yes.
Okay, so our first panelist, Ted Gordon, has been a fixture at the short course for many, many years. I know a lot of people out there recognize him and know him, much admired. He's a graduate of Rutgers University, and Ted is recognized statewide as a leading authority on the habitats and flora of the New Jersey Pine Barrens. He's a specialist in New Jersey rare and endangered plant species with 50 years of experience in botanical studies, including contributions to major plant studies of rare and endangered plants in the Pinelands. He served as a member of the Pinelands Commission from December 1998 to 2002, and as a former president of the prestigious Philadelphia Botanical Club, a position he held for 12 years from 1988 to 2000. Thank you for joining us, Ted.
My pleasure.
So you moved here from Germany in December of 1948 after your stepfather was assigned to Fort Dix, which is where you started to see Pinelands plants. And it reminded you of the forest back home. Can you talk about that experience and what drew you into what would become a lifelong interest in the Pinelands?
Yeah. On several occasions, weekends, I think they were, in 1949, I accompanied my stepfather to his newly assigned workplace along Range Road on Fort Dix, adjacent to Gaunt's plant Cedar Swamp on Whitesball. I was 11 years old and had just arrived from Germany a few weeks earlier. This was my introduction to the New Jersey Pine Barrens. I felt at home right away. The pitch pine forests here reminded me of the communal Scots pine forests, Pinus sylvestris, where I had gathered firewood and wild mushrooms in my hometown or outside of my hometown, Hockenheim, a farming community in Baden-Württemberg in the central Rhine Valley of Germany. On returning to Gaunt's Branch many years later as a botanist, I discovered here the rare plants curly glass fern, Arethusa orchid, New Jersey rush, and bog asphodel, Narcissus americanum. A visit with my stepfather in 1949 to the site of nearby Hanover Furnace above Muir Lake in Browns Mills led to my lifelong obsession of researching and exploring bog ore mining and bog iron furnaces and forges. So that was the initial contact. And what fascinates me today about the Pinelands, after so many years of study of the area, is the extensive forested region extending from Cape May County all the way up to Monmouth County, covering 7 counties. It's an amazing stretch of land midway between New York City and Philadelphia. These extremely dense population centers. The adverse landscapes for rare species habitats can vary from a small patch of land, size of a square feet really, to several hundred acres. Particularly in the landscapes around Forked River Mountain.
Mm-hmm.
There, in a small patch, about 2 meters square, I found 5 pine-bearing gentians on a patch, as I said, just 2 meters square. In contrast, on a logged cedar stand about 100 acres on Middle Branch of the Forked River, north of Oyster Creek power plant, which is closed now, I discovered a large de novo population of an estimated 2,500 seed pods of bog asphodel.
Wow.
There had been no populations found from that vicinity in over 100 years. So this was totally new, and I discovered several others there. But this is the Pine Barrens. It's diverse. I never tire of exploring these habitats. We have, for example, heathlands of huckleberry and blueberry that are among the finest in the world.
Mm-hmm.
The plains are a unique place. The pygmy pines or dwarf pines. You don't have anything like that anywhere else in the world. The large areas of several hundred acres. The Corima conradii, Conrad Scrowberry, has the largest representations anywhere in the country at that site. The stunted pitch pine plains of the Warren Grove area are among my favorite habitats to explore. Serotinous cones and basal sprouts that Harold Lutz in his 1934 thesis discussed or reported on for the first time are still to be found there in abundance. Our sphagnum moss fens or wet savannas are among the most diverse sphagnum moss wetlands in the world. And who would think that the Middle Atlantic state such as New Jersey, would harbor some 30 species of sphagnum moss. It's phenomenal.
Mhm.
People who study these habitats come here from Europe and are amazed at the number of species we have here. It's totally unexpected. When I first started studying these things, I thought there was one sphagnum moss. And New York State has even more, has 45 to 50.
Wow.
But New Jersey is one of the best in the world. The orchids you're seeing on the screen right now, ball asphodel, and the others are typical in these landscapes.
Okay. So it looks like we're looking at some photos here of you exploring the Pine Barrens, and it's my understanding you've probably explored every mile. These are your photos, and these are photos of you probably in the 60s, correct?
Some of them go back to the 60s, to my high school years, yeah.
Yeah, and I imagine you've taken thousands and thousands of photographs, and I understand you will be providing those to Stockton, I think, or as an archive.
Yes, Stockton will receive them, and they will get many of my books and other materials on the Pine Barrens. I think it's important for people to know that Stockton has developed an archival center for studying South Jersey history. And of course, the Pine Barrens are a great part of that. And they already have major collections of former friends of mine that study the Pine Barrens as well. There are some key scholars that have spent many years and have donated their collections. The orange fringe orchid you just saw, and here the rose begonia, are among my favorite plants. The orange fringe is one of the rarest Pine Barrens orchids, while rose begonia is one of the more common ones.
Okay. Do you have a particular favorite spot or spots you like to go to over the years? Were there particular places where you found to be the most fascinating?
Well, I love the plains around Warren Grove area. They are fantastic habitats. I love what are called intermittent ponds, many of which are found in Atlantic County. The intermittent ponds are misnamed quite often by others in New Jersey as vernal ponds. We really have nothing to speak of vernal ponds in the Pine Barrens. They are without water almost any time, and unpredictably so. But they do fluctuate, and it is this fluctuation that's vital to creating the unique habitat that they are. And those, many of them are in Atlantic County. Goose Pond, Big Goose Pond and Little Goose Pond, which were explored by the outstanding botanists, the Hearst brothers, who really should be credited for doing a lot of the early work in the Pine Barrens. And there are several others that should be given major credit. Bayard Long of the Academy of Natural Sciences in Philadelphia was a person who explored the pines, and if he didn't find it back in the early 1900s, nobody else had the rare plants. By the way, this is leaves bogs at Bear Hole that you just saw with the turkey beard in bloom.
Mhm.
The Arethusa that you just showed is a beautiful orchid, one of my favorites.
Mhm. Yeah. When does that one bloom, roughly?
Well, in usually, let's see, around in the middle of summertime. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, Joel, do you have any follow-up questions? We have a few minutes left with Ted. I know there's some historical photos there as well.
Yeah, that was Cutter's Pump on the Oswego River near
Yeah,
near
no
Calgary.
questions this time, Paul.
Okay. All right. Very good. Well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for that, Ted.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Beautiful photos. It's wonderful to hear that your amazing exploration will be preserved in perpetuity by Stockton, and all those excellent photos that you've taken and that you've had digitized look fantastic. And I think that's really important. You've documented a part of history that really is really essential for us to have going forward and to enjoy. So thank you for that, Ted.
Yeah, I'm grateful to Tom Kinsella for doing that work. God is digitizing them. It's a big job.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. We're going to move on to our next panelist, which is Terry O'Leary.
Hey, Paul, just before we go, I just want to put a note out to the attendees. Send in questions, use the question and answer or the Q&A, not the chat, and we'll be able to respond that way. So
Okay.
use that Q&A for the questions.
All right.
But try to keep them in mind, and we'll really try to get to them once we get through the individual speakers.
All right. Thank you. All right. So our second panelist is Terry O'Leary. He's another longtime presenter at the short course. I know a lot of people know Terry throughout the state. Terry has been an environmental educator for 40 years. He holds a master's degree from Glassboro State College with postgraduate studies in horticulture and forestry from Rutgers. And after years of working as a naturalist at Whitesbog, Terry joined the new staff when the Pinelands Regional High School opened. He started one of the first high school environmental science and field ecology programs in New Jersey. He also worked as a consultant as the program director at the Barnegat Bay Decoy Bayman's Museum and served as the education coordinator at the Forest Resource Education Center for many years. Thank you for joining us, Terry.
Glad to be here.
All right, we're looking at some great photos here. So you've been an environmental educator at numerous places for over 4 decades, and you've had an enormous impact on so many people's lives over these years. And out of all these various experiences in the Pinelands, what do you want to be most known for and why?
Well, my whole mantra has been to share what I have learned from people who were mentors to me. An important mentor just spoke before I did, Ted Gordon. I learned an awful lot from him. And you'll see in some of the pictures other ones that were important to me, like Dr. Jean Vivian. You also have Elizabeth Morgan. You also have Walt Bien, Dr. Walt Bien from Drexel, Dr. Roger Locandro, the Dean of Cook College. These people had a big impact on me. And not only did I learn from them, I was happy to corroborate with them and work with them on a whole number of projects. The main thing to do is to see what you can learn and see what you can share with others. So you make lifelong friends that way, and you try to have an impact on it, because everything that we tried to do it as experiential learning, where it wasn't just go out in the woods and give a lecture. It was to have hands-on interactive activities where you would feel, touch, taste, smell the environment and have a lot of hands-on experience. That's the most important thing to do, is to have important mentors and to pass it on to others. And I was always fond of activities that were project based. In other words, you'd have a project and you tried to run with it. Worked in cooperation with the Ocean County Soil Conservation District, where Becky works, and I work with Dave Friedman and Christine Rabe, and we got the idea to go to schools and try to teach the adults through the students, and have the students, as every school has a detention basin or a retention basin or infiltration basin, whatever they called it, on the school site. And we actually took those places and made them into rain gardens where all the runoff would go and not only be absorbed or held back, but also be habitat for wildlife, be habitat to have different wetland species in there. And so over a period of years, we put in rain gardens at 20 schools and facilities in Ocean County, from the Jacques Cousteau Preserve and Education Center to the Tuckerton Seaport, to Lavalette Elementary School, to Crawford Rodriguez School in Jackson, to the Forest Resource Education Center, the Lighthouse Center for Natural Resource Education. And in each case, we'd go to the school and we'd show them a base drawing of the basin and have the students give input. They would tell me what they would like to see in the basin. And of course, some of their concept of landscaping was to have topiary like you would have at Disney World. And we made sure that didn't fly. And we made sure we used appropriate plants that would flourish in the wetlands. And then we provided plants from the Forest Resource Education Center tree nursery. The soil district purchased native plants, and we went to the school. Ocean County reclamation people would provide us with double shredded mulch and filtered topsoil, and many hands and many buckets and many wheelbarrows. We would dig, spread, plant, and finish it. And then the students felt like they were part of it. Those places were never vandalized because they were student-driven projects. And they learned whatever age group. We went from first graders all the way up to seniors in high school and did this. And we felt like we left a lasting mark in the community. Now, the other thing that I was fond of was creating what we call outdoor learning stations. And these would be places that would be trailhead or a tipping off point to go and explore. And usually they had an informational kiosk, and we teamed these up with a solar powered talking trees. So in each kiosk, there was a button that was bulletproof, speakers attached upward in it, solar panels on top of it, and a number of messages. So if I wasn't there or another naturalist wasn't there, they could get the same messages. And sometimes they like hearing them from somebody else. We got these recordings after we told them what to put down from a company in Montana. So we had to correct them when they used the words like roots instead of roots, etc. So it was a lot of fun. And at the Forest Resource Education Center, there's 10 outdoor learning stations, from everything from an arboretum A to Z, which we made a garden that you could walk along and identify plants surrounding our septic field, because you had to have the septic field anyway. And we had one for swamp life, for watershed investigations, for teaching biological succession, called the Changing Forest, to sensory awareness, where we use a guide rope and students would walk along the rope, make the OK sign, put that around the rope, not hanging on the rope, and walk forward. Every 10 feet exactly was a post, and they could lift it up after they hit the post and go forward. The bottom was crushed stone, so they could feel what they were doing. And there were things from very small things like mosses and lichens up to larger things. And one of the things we like to do at the Forestry Center is to have things you could taste. So we created a kiosk and learning station where you could learn how to tap the trees, maple trees, and evaporate the sap and make maple syrup. So the parents would come and they couldn't believe that I would put a yoke on the shoulder of a young kid with 2 buckets, and they would carry sap out of the swamp and bring them to the evaporator. I would say, my kid wouldn't even take out the garbage. Now you have them carrying sap in a bucket on shoulders. But it was hands-on learning, and they never forgot that. Same thing with, we had beehives to pollinate the trees. So we had a whole honeybee presentation where they learn how to identify an insect, learn the benefits of bees and honey, and actually get taste a little sample. We would put animal crackers with a drop of honey on it, and they would get to taste it. So it was very hands-on. And I have people now who are grown said, when I was a kid, I went with you and I ate honey out of the woods. We also did things like shiitake mushrooms. And again, we would do the benefits of native plants. So they would have tea berry tea, sumac lemonade, take sphagnum moss and squeeze it out and put it on a wound, all those kinds of things. So they're all interactive and hands-on activities. So that's what I did mostly in the different places I worked, but also was involved in doing research on Pine Barrens animals and plants, such as plants that Ted had mentioned, like Pine Barrens gentian, northern pine snake, Pine Barrens tree frog. And we did a whole number of studies in the Forked River Mountains and elsewhere. And we had a lot of projects where we would be hired by a company who wanted to develop a gravel mine or whatever, and they had to demonstrate that there were no rare or endangered species there. And we told them, you're going to pay for good news or bad news. Our idea of good news might have been different than theirs, but if we would find the presence of a species, we would be happy. We were happy to find a pine snake that stopped the construction of a second nuclear power plant at Forked River at one time. That was the plan. And we found a pine snake where the only way into this property was right in that area. And we had their consultant hold up the pine snake, and I backed him around so that behind him was the stack at the power plant. I said, you want me to take your picture? Because he never held a snake before. Took his picture, and then we called the company, and they said, unless you destroy that photo, we're going to stop payment on the check. So, oh, really? I said, well, we are already electronically submitted this to the Pinelands Commission. So guess what? We did that. And if you don't pay us, that's another whole issue that we'll deal with. But we had our dignity that we stuck with the whole time. And we have a picture of this moron holding the pine snake in front of the stack at the power plant. So a little bit of indication for that. Also, I was very fond of taking the programs and not just make it very loose. When a group of students would sign up to come on a field trip, they had to provide a list of how many students, what they were going to do, and we would tell them the protocol of what would happen. You're going to come prepared to learn. There's going to be adult chaperones. You're going to stay with the instructor. You are going to have objectives that we are going to provide the teacher before the program. We're going to behavioral objectives, what they should learn, quantifying it to match what schools require for lesson plans, student worksheets for them to fill out, and they came on task, and that made it a good program. So I was trying to tally it up last night, 24 different curriculum guides that I developed with my colleagues at work, from swamp life to quail in the classroom. I worked with Bob Birdsall. We took his book, Seasons of the Pines, and we made it interactive for students who couldn't afford a coffee table book like Bob's. We got some grants. We did a whole program on the Great Bay Boulevard eco tour, the Arboretum, wildlife habitats, pioneer homesteads, where we would go into the Pine Barrens and find a place that had a former settlement and try to find clues to the past. We call those artifacts. And the mantra and the protocol was, you do not take it with you. You put it back right where you found it. So we were just recently with a school in Bayville at an Indian shell mound, and we found Native American signs, and we found very, very large oyster shells, and they were to show this to me and put it back where they like doing that. They didn't, as long as you set the tone, will do the right thing. Trails, we like to work on trails. There's 7 miles of trails at the Forestry Center. There's a 1.5 mile trail at the Lighthouse Center. There's a 0.5 mile trail at the Tuckerton Seaport. And most of those were done by supervised volunteers. And my volunteers were people who just wanted to do the right thing. I supervised 8 years in a row of the watershed ambassadors. I had them at the FREC, and they came and helped me. Eagle Scouts, about a dozen Eagle Scout projects where it was meaningful, and otherwise I wouldn't be the one that wanted to mentor them. And then a lot of hands-on projects. You see a picture of me of my tractor in the Forked River Mountains when we had Earth Day cleanup. I'm, along with Ted, one of the original, I guess, founding members of the Forked River Mountain Coalition. And I was on the Lacey Environmental Commission, and they said, look, you're going to be replaced by a cook at the county jail because you talk too much. Mm-hmm. So that was something that I didn't feel bad about being uncomplimented about it. So go out there and clean up hundreds of tons of trash every year on Earth Day. When I was at the FRAC, we partnered with the New Jersey Forest Fire Service and the federal government at the Warren Grove. They don't like to call it bombing, but the Warren Grove bombing range. And we would do a program every day during Earth Week. So it's appropriate to talk about it now. Monday through Friday, we would have a program with a different school that was east of the bombing range that would be at most risk if the bombing range accidentally caused a fire by missing a target. Not to say that that hasn't happened. It did. They hit the top of the Little Lake Harbor Intermediate School. And these communities wanted to be good neighbors, but they also wanted to know what was going on. So the day they came, we would go out and do a tour and measure trees to show which ones were actually pygmy trees.
Mhm.
And then the second hour, we would go and do a transect. We would identify species. They would have cards with the species name on it. They'd stand in front of the species, and I would ask them questions because the back of the card had their answers. So they're being interactive that way. The third hour, they would be allowed to go up the tower at the bombing range, and we'd have lunch. So, and fourth hour, we would bring seedlings, and we would actually, with a given class of 30 or so kids, we'd plant 1,000 trees each day. So over every week that I did this for about 9 years, we planted 5,000 trees in the pygmy forest. So it wasn't just an exercise, it was something to do something special and interactive.
Well, that's great. I am very impressed with your experience all those years and educating so many people about what makes the Pinelands so special, and especially with the experiential learning. Very impressive. I just have one other quick question. What is your favorite thing to do in the Pine Barrens?
It's to go out and explore hands-on and do activities. When I retired from the Forest Service, I wasn't ready to just put up my spurs and not do anything. So I took on a program called a Barnegat Bay Volunteer Master Naturalist Course. Now, you've heard people who are master gardeners who can't identify a tick. So we wanted to be more meaningful. So they would take 40 hours of training that I would facilitate, and we'd go to different parks, learn who the naturalists were, learn what they did, and then they had to put in 40 hours of volunteer time where they would assist the places that needed help. And now you had trained volunteer help. And so I did it for 3 years. Now, a presenter you're going to meet in a little while, Miss Becky, is running it now. So it's continuing, and we're creating wonderful people that we're still in touch with. I have a guy, Paul Lang, who volunteers regularly at the Black Swamp Reserve. So John must know him.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Terry. Very good. Once again, for the benefit of the attendees or participants, people watching, there'll be an opportunity for questions at the end. Let's move on to our next panelist. Our next panelist, John Volpa, has also delivered numerous short course presentations over the years, as well as webinars. John is a lifelong resident of Southern New Jersey who taught environmental science in Chemung Township for over 20 years. And since leaving the indoor classroom, John has been leading hiking, paddling, and bus tours as Pinelands Adventures Director of Education. Additionally, John is the founder and chair of the Friends of the Black Run Preserve in Isham Township. Thank you very much for joining us, John.
Thank you.
All right. So we're showing some slides here. You've spent a considerable amount of your personal life and professional career educating other people about the Pinelands. What was your introduction to the Pinelands, and what struck you about the region?
My introduction came from just growing up in the area. I grew up on my grandfather's farm in Sicklerville, which is in Winslow Township. And his farm was really right on the edge of the intercoastal plain and the outer coastal plain. So within a mile, you could walk into the pines. And as a child, my parents had a challenging relationship. And when things got a little too intense in the house, I was out the door and in the woods. And essentially, that meant, finding a refuge. And behind Grandpa's farm, there was a stream. And the older I got, my cousin and I would constantly be exploring where the stream led. And eventually we learned that it led to New Brooklyn Lake, which is part of the Great Egg Harbor River. And eventually that's where we would go fishing and ice skating in the wintertime. And so that was my initiation into the Pine Barrens. And then this is the 1960s, we went from Sicklerville School, which back then was a 3-room schoolhouse with 6 grades. We would go to Batstow for class trips and to Smithville for a dinner. So we began to get an exploration of the pines at that point, along with Boy Scouts, camping and hiking in Wharton State Forest, camping at Bodine Field, etc. So then by college, really began to explore the pines even more. A good friend who knew the area very well, he had a Camaro, and believe it or not, we would drive the sand roads in his Camaro. And back then, the sand roads weren't in the condition they are now because people didn't have the big trucks, etc. Not too many people knew about the pines, and you really had to know the sand roads and know how to read a topo map. But we would explore, and we never got stuck, surprisingly. Couple of times, came pretty close, but we would discover places like Harrisville, Lake Oswego, Pygmy Pine Plains. And we were just always struck by the subtle, quiet beauty of the pines. And by then I had traveled out west, and certainly we don't have the majestic, grand, majestic views of the West, but the pines are just so incredibly beautiful in their own subtle way. And during that time, I read McPhee's The Pine Barrens. So this is, early 70s now. 75, I got my first teaching job in Salem County, and I was teaching special education at that time. And to pick up on what Terry was saying, back then, special education was, we were taught at Glassboro State College, the VAKT method, visual, auditory, kinesthetic, and tactile. So it was really about, teaching kids through their modalities. So in 85, when I moved to Evesham Township and started teaching in Chemung, I started teaching environmental science at the 6th grade level. And I brought that experience into the classroom, and it really became about experiential learning as much as possible outside the classroom. And I was lucky enough to coordinate the 2.5-day 6th grade overnight trip to Camp Occonequin. And that was really an extension of that experiential learning, where kids are taking what they've learned in the classroom to the wilderness of Camp Occonequin in the middle of Bedford. But it was really a wonderful experience. And from there, I started an ecology club to really work with those kids that were truly inspired by outdoor education. And one of the things that I was most proud of, that we built a Pinelands ecosystem, upland wetlands, in a courtyard of the school that had a stream, a pond, wetland plants, upland plants. It was pretty cool. And so by then in my life, I expanded my recreational activities from hiking and camping and canoeing to mountain biking and kayaking. So part of the ecology club was at the end of the year in March, before we got ready for our trip to go to Camp Occonequin, we would have our annual mountain bike hike in the pines. And so this was really an opportunity to take 20 kids with 4 adults into the pines for an 8-mile bike hike. And, you're doing something hard and challenging. And I remember kids saying wow, I didn't think I could do this. I just feel so much a sense of accomplishment and a sense of pride in being able to be challenged. And so it really gave me the push to do more of those things beyond Camp Occonequin and beyond the Ecology Club. And I started working with REI Outdoor School, again, leading people on outdoor trips to share the outdoors and the beauty of nature with people. So by 2015, as you said in the introduction, I began working with Pinelands Adventures, and Pinelands Adventures is an outreach of Pinelands Preservation Alliance. And really the idea is to try and make more people aware of the beauty of the Pinelands and the specialness of the Pine Barrens. And unless people understand it through experience, through paddling, through hiking, through education, to really understand it, that's the only way they're going to care for it. Mm-hmm. And if they care for it, we have to create a generation of people that experience it and care for it. Otherwise, who's going to advocate for it when all of us are gone? You've got to have more young people who are saying that this is important and we know why it's important. And all those special plants and animals that Ted talked about and all those beautiful environments that Terry talked about, they just don't remain that way without an effort. And so that's really what we've been trying to do. And one of the best experiences I had one day with Pinelands Adventures, we were lucky enough to have donors who very much wanted underserved communities to experience the pines. So we were, offering trips to students from Newark, Camden, Philadelphia, Camden County shelters, et cetera. And was lucky enough to take a group of kids from Camden out to Goshen Pond, and we're paddling. And Goshen Pond is one of my favorite places to go to. My wife and I paddle there often. And this young woman said, I've never experienced quiet like this in my entire life. And she said, I've never felt this much peace in my entire life. And it was just so moving that, like, wow, this is the first time this young person had an experience like this. And we have this 1.1 million acres of beautiful wilderness that just allows us to have this refuge. And it always has been a refuge. For me personally, pretty much everyone at some point, you get to be old enough, you experience disease, divorce, death, and nature is key to escaping into it, to be rejuvenated and cast away those negatives and bring back the positives and get your bearings again. So for me, it's always been a refuge to go into the pines and feel that sense of peace and quiet and get centered again so that you can move forward and be positive.
Sure. That's what I wanted to talk about next, and we've spoken about this before, how, especially during the past year when so many of us have been working at home, and the pines have been this incredible resource and refuge for people to get out. And so how important is it for people to connect with nature and all that the Pinelands has to offer from a recreational as well as a physical and mental health standpoint?
It's a great question. And as you said, Paul, this past year has only made it incredibly clear since the pandemic began how much people need to be immersed in nature. It's just part of being a human being that we really connect with life. And it's just so rejuvenating on so many different levels. On the health benefits are just incredible. On the physical level, you get out into nature. Even if you're in the city and you walk through a park as opposed to a busy street, cortisol levels go down. So the stress level goes down. Blood pressure goes down. Anxiety and depression are reduced. These are all backed up by research. In the past 20 years, people are beginning to understand the positive emotional, physical, and social benefits of being in nature. Increased immunity. We respond particularly to pines. Pine trees, going back to what Ted was saying about, coming from Germany and experiencing pine forests back in the day of sanatoriums that were being created to deal with TB. the theory was that pine forests, the clean air, helped people improve from the TB. Well, a sanatorium was started in the Pine Barrens in Pemberton, which later became Deborah Heart and Lung Hospital. And evidence has shown that those pine trees are putting out chemicals called phytoncides that the human body reacts to, and our immune system reacts to them and increases our ability to fend off disease. We have increased energy, increased vitamin D production, lowers the risk of heart attack and diabetes. The list is endless. But the other thing that I like to point out to people is it's not only the physical benefits. We all love to go out and be there with our friends. So you get to go out and you can, recreate, even if it's just taking a walk, the easiest, most inexpensive form of recreation recommended by the CDC. Get a couple, hours of walking in a week. It's going to make you a healthier person, but doing it with another human being, turning off the little screen and being with someone in real space and time and sharing that beauty together and that time together, that is what people need. And that's become so obvious during the pandemic that people need to be with one another in these places. So America has so many open spaces, so many parks and recreational areas that I think there has to be more access for trails, for infrastructure to bring people out of urban areas, give people more opportunities, particularly people of color who haven't had these opportunities and haven't really been encouraged to be in the outdoors. I think we need to make it more inclusive. And there are organizations like PPA and Sierra Club and NJCF who are really becoming aware of that in this past year because of the murder of George Floyd, that we need to make the outdoors more accessible to a diverse America. So those positive social aspects, and that's what we've been trying to do in the Black Run Preserve, is promote the value of ecological value of the Pine Barrens. We've got this little island oasis of still pristine pine barrens in Evesham Township, and it is accessible. And we hope that people will respect one another and the land. And just, maybe you'll see someone who looks or dresses differently than you. Well, just a little wave or a nod, just a recognition of respect, that helps promote peace. Just passing one another. It's like, I passed someone who looked differently than me and it was okay. I didn't feel threatened. We just waved or, nodded at one another. And these are things that are simple and just so easy to help improve the social fabric, the emotional fabric of our country, our world. Globally, people have been flocking outdoors in the past year, and pretty much some places are being overrun. Black Run is a little being overrun, but there are, again, if other places were more accessible, I think that would help and go a long way. So the value of open space just can't be underestimated. Ecological value, public health value, economic value. All these things are just so many positives, and I just feel so blessed to have always been able to get into the woods when things get challenging and tough, to just get out into the pines and chill out and relax and come out with a better attitude. So that's
Very good. All right. Do you have any information about any tours that are out there for those with disabilities? Do you know something does Pinelands Adventures do that, or are there others?
Yeah, hopefully when things, improve, there is an ADA trail at Sign Lake. And so we were running a tour that was ADA and, accessible. Black Run Preserve, there's a very short trail that's been on our radar to try and improve our Peaceful Partners Trail so that it would be ADA accessible for a what is called a Rough Rider wheelchair. But there's too many puddles right now that need to be filled in. We've got a beaver issue, which many places do. Right. But Batstow has some accessible spaces. So there are some spots that are accessible, but we certainly need more and more infrastructure, like bathrooms.
Mm-hmm.
You can't, people need bathrooms when they go out. It's and knowing where, how to access places and how to get back safely.
All right. Well, thank you very much, John.
Sure.
All right. So our next panelist is Becky LeBoy, who has delivered numerous Pinelands presentations and webinars over the years for the commission and at the short course. Her love of the Pinelands began as a child when her parents took family vacations canoeing and camping down the Swimming and Mullica rivers, or spent the day exploring the maritime forests and salt marsh along the shore. As a full-time education outreach specialist with the Ocean County Soil Conservation District, adjunct professor at Kane University, instructor for the Barnegat Bay Volunteer Master Naturalist course, and part-time naturalist for Wells Mills Barnegat Bay Volunteer Master Naturalist course, and part-time naturalist for Wells Mills County Park, Becky shares her love and passion for the pines with others. From barrens to bogs, from soil to trees, and Becky holds an MA in education and a BS in biology, a BA in international relations, and her New Jersey teaching credentials. Very well. All right. Thank you for joining us, Becky.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me, Paul. Thank you, Joel. I am just thrilled and honored to be here to represent the other 51% of the population, women. So thank you so much. And thanks to the Pinelands Commission as well.
All right. Thank you for being here. What made you want to become an environmental educator, and how did the Pinelands play a role in that decision?
That is a great question. And I want to say, first of all, it's been a thrill to hear the first couple of speakers. They are all mentors in my life, in particular, Terry O'Leary. I've learned so much from him. And John, I've learned so much from you, going back many years. And I loved hearing your story, John. Our stories are actually pretty similar. I don't think I actually decided to become an environmental educator. I think that career kind of found me, or I'll say it is who I am, and it's who I am because of my parents, really. And you'll see in the slideshow some really old photos of my parents taking myself and my sister out on the swimming river in a canoe when I was 2 years old and my sister Debbie was 4 years old. Luckily, we had life jackets on, so they did take a couple of precautions there, but it was kind of fun looking through these photos to prepare for this program and talking about the stories and the memories with my dad. We also went canoe camping as young children. I was 4 years old, so I guess they thought that was old enough, and I definitely agree, but as you can see in the photos, there were no bags. The sleeping bags were just simply thrown in the canoe, not protected. So thank goodness we did not tip over. We would have all been wet and miserable. But truly, my parents were really adventurists, and they wanted to instill a love of nature that they obviously have into their kids. So they just, strapped on the life jacket, put us in the canoe, and we had a great time canoeing and camping on the Swimming River, which is actually just above the border of the Pinelands. It's in Monmouth County. And then in 1975, my parents moved from the Shrewsbury Little Silver area down to Ocean County, where this photo shows my parents bought a house that was built in 1883. And they fixed it up. And then in 2010, my husband and I bought that house, and we continue to live there now. And it's now our homestead, and we still have the same canoe. And my sister and I go out in that canoe every summer. We try to get out every summer and enjoy. Like I said, I'm an environmental educator because, if we think about nature versus nurture, I was nurtured to be an environmental educator. And I like to say sometimes that I was raised by the woods, I was raised by the river, I was raised by the trees. My parents just let us go, and we just went out and played in the woods all day. And then around dinner time, head back home, and we just had a great time every day. So my childhood, in the woods continued as I got older. My mother was a Girl Scout troop leader. She actually started a troop. There hadn't been one in our area. And of course, our troop was centered completely around the outdoors. I was a Girl Scout from Brownies through seniors, so Brownies, juniors, cadets, and seniors, and it shaped my life truly. As a cadet, we had kind of a combined cadet senior troop, and believe it or not, we actually prepared and executed a 3-day backpacking trip. All of us women and young ladies started from Double Trouble State Park area, and we hiked through the woods with just topo maps and compasses. There were no, of course, smartphones back then, and ended up in Tuckerton. And I say ended up, I believe we were heading in that direction, but I don't recall that we ended up exactly where we were supposed to be. I think we ended up somewhere and had to make a phone call and be picked up at a different location than what our destination really was. But I remember carrying cans of something or other, cans of beans or whatever it was in my backpack, and begging my sister to help me with my load because she's my older sister and it was too heavy for me. But it was just a really grand experience, one that shaped my life certainly. And as a Girl Scout, we earn awards comparable to Boy Scouts. I know Boy Scouts are known for the Eagle Scout Award, which is an excellent award and certainly a high achievement, but girls have that too. In Girl Scouting, we have a bronze, silver, and gold, and the gold is comparable to the Eagle Scout Award. And I earned my bronze and silver. I actually I created somewhat of a curriculum to teach Brownie Scouts about living in the outdoors. And I didn't complete my gold, and I certainly look back and regret it, but my sister did, so good for her. And, then I became a teacher. I actually moved away from New Jersey for 10 years. I spent my 20s in California. Palm trees and beaches, and moved out there in 1990 to go to school. I loved exploring the outdoors of the Chaparral in Southern California, but the East Coast was calling, so I returned here in 2001 in August, and reconnected with my roots here, and started volunteering at Island Beach State Park, where I grew up going there on free Tuesdays, and I got my teaching credential in California, and then I got my teaching credential in New Jersey. So I did teach in the classroom formally for several years here. But really, the outdoors was pulling at my heartstrings, and I transitioned into becoming an environmental educator. So I worked at several different places, New Jersey Audubon, at Rancocas, and I worked at Island Beach State Park and Ocean County Park System, which I still work intermittently as a bird guide, and found a permanent position with Ocean County Soil Conservation District, and I'm just thrilled to share my passion and love of the outdoors with anyone who will listen, children, but certainly adults as well. And I feel very fortunate. Terry O'Leary passed the torch to me. So I now teach the Barnegat Bay Volunteer Master Naturalist Program. And a lot of these photos you're seeing are our group of folks who each year, aside from last year, 2020, we had to, of course, halt the program, and we haven't started up this year, but we're really crossing our fingers that either spring of 2022 or maybe fall this year, we're not certain yet, we'll restart the program and introduce adults who want to reconnect and offer service time as volunteers to the Barnegat Bay watershed, to the community here in which I live, in which they live. An extension of the Pinelands region certainly goes from barrens to bogs to beaches. So we explore headwaters to the bay, and as John was saying, and our other speakers noted, that people don't realize that this is actually a piece of their life that was missing. And once they're introduced to the outdoors, they're all in. They just jump right in and want to save land and learn the names of all the trees and the birds and make that intimate connection with nature that can really change a person's life and change a person's mindset when you're connecting with nature and you get to know the names and the life history of trees that are in your backyard, or plants in your backyard, or butterflies that flutter through your backyard, or frogs and toads that you find on a walk, or box turtles, things like that. So it's been quite a thrill to be an environmental educator, and I will never stop being an educator, even after I someday retire.
Oh, okay. Well, you have a passion for birding, I know, among many other things, but what are your favorite places in the Pinelands for birding, and what are the best times of the year to go do that?
Yeah, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk about birds, because I just love birds. I was first introduced to, I'll say, birds and birding in California when I started taking a couple just kind of fun classes at the San Diego Natural History Museum, and learned all about birds and herpetology and geology at the wonderful classes the museum offered, and then kind of took not necessarily the species, but ecological applications, and could apply them to this particular habitat of how things work together, biology and ecology. And I remember my sister visited me out there in California, and I played tour guide and took her to some of my favorite places, and we were spying on birds. At that time, I didn't really know there was this whole kind of underground group of folks all over the world who look at birds and actually list them. So the game is to find as many different species as you possibly can and add them to your life list. And then you kind of check off your day list and your month list and your season list and your year list, and how many in each county of New Jersey, and how many species in the entire state, and how many species in the United States. My sister and I are currently doing a 50-50 quest. We want to see 50 species in every state in the United States. And there we are, still birding together. And she comes to visit. She lives outside of Philly, and she comes to visit, and we explore the Pine Barrens. And some of my favorite places include, of course, Island Beach State Park. And I think a typical person might say, well, you know, it's just a beach. You go and you enjoy the sun and the water. But there's actually a couple of trails on the bay side, in particular, Reed's Road and Spizzle Creek Bird Blind, where you walk back there. And it's a magnet for birds, really, on the migratory, you know, Atlantic Flyway. So migration has started, and Reed's Road is an excellent place to see birds right now, from small birds such as warblers or thrushes. Swallows have arrived, also egrets and herons, and all those beautiful wading birds, and then our beautiful raptors, osprey and owls. So an array of different birds. And then moving inland a little bit more, our park system, I live in Ocean County, but there are amazing park systems throughout the Pine Barrens, Burlington County, Atlantic County, Cape May County, Cumberland, Salem, Camden, and even up north in New Jersey. Some of my favorite places are Wells Mills County Park, where I wear my Wells Mills County Park hat every once in a while to do birding tours, but going there on your own any time of year. Spring, summer, winter, fall, there are different kinds of birds. And that's another great thing about birding is in the winter, the waterfowl come and overwinter here in New Jersey. And in the springtime, migration comes through here as well as in the fall. And then in the summertime, we have breeders like several of those warblers you just saw. Here's a Chuck Will's widow incubating her egg. I'm not going to tell you where that is, but anywhere in the pines where there's leaf litter, oak leaf litter, pine needles on the forest floor is habitat for Chuck Will's widow and whippoorwills, which you might hear calling outside your window at night in the summertime. Let's see, White's Bog is a wonderful place to go birding. The cranberry bogs, that habitat is a magnet for birds as well of all kinds. Tundra swans come and overwinter at White's Bog in the wintertime. And then, of course, we have our migration and breeders in the summer and in the fall, even some shorebirds come, believe it or not, to feed at White's Bog. Looking at my list here, Rancocas Nature Center. That's where I saw my first black-billed cuckoo in New Jersey. And I had a photo of yellow-billed cuckoo, which are quite common. Collier's Mills and is another great place to see birds and black-billed, yellow-billed cuckoos there. And then for folks who live in Atlantic County or anywhere, really, come visit Edwin B. Forsyth. Easy place to start birding, or you're birding by car, basically going around that auto loop and seeing all the wonderful waterfowl and shorebirds. And August, September is a great time to go see shorebirds, but really any time is a good time for birds because they're here all year round, different species. And if you go out and take a walk in the woods or the wet woods, the pines, salt marsh, bay shore habitat. If you look around to see what wildlife is out there, you might see tracks or scat to see what was there, but more likely you're going to see a bird or you're going to hear a bird. So birding is a great way to get to know who's living in your backyard or backyard at large. And they're, just beautiful, all different sounds. That's a whole nother challenge, is to learn the different sounds that the birds make. Warblers in the springtime, or walking in the woods. In the deep woods, you might not see as many different species, but you'll hear some birds, and to know their calls or know their songs, it just brings a lot of personal pleasure to me and to others, I'm sure. And it's just a great hobby. And you can actually bird and botanize at the same time. So that's a lot of fun too. So go out and see some orchids are rare plants, and while you're out there, keep your ears open, your eyes open for birds and other wildlife too, of course.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you for that. I'm sure
Thank
there's going to be
you.
some questions at the end about birding. I'm certain.
I hope so.
Right? You would think. All right. We're going to move to our final panelist, who is Sam Moore. And he brings a wealth of knowledge and experience in cranberry and blueberry growing. You may have heard of Moore's Meadow Farm in Tabernacle, right? And on June 1st, 2018, he retired as a full-time section forest fire warden for the New Jersey Forest Fire Service after 25 years and 1 month of service. He is now back assisting the New Jersey Forest Fire Service as a part-time on-call district forest fire warden and operator of Wildland Brush Truck B28. Sam is happily married to his wife, Penny Moore, who's from Chatsworth, and he's a proud father of 2 sons, Samuel the fourth and Matthew Moore, who are representing the 7th generation of farmers. Thank you for joining us, Sam.
Hey, thank you for having me. It's
All
great
right.
to be here.
So you're a 6th generation blueberry and cranberry farmer, and your ancestors purchased the farmland from a general in the Revolutionary War back to 1829. Do I have that right?
That is correct, 1829.
Okay. And speaking as a lifelong farmer, why is farming such an important part of this region's identity and nature?
Well, I've always said that farmers are the first and foremost that basically protected the Pine Barrens prior to the Pinelands Commission, because especially for the cranberry growing and the blueberries, it's for every 10 acres or for every acre of cranberries, you need like 10 acres of supportive land. And farmers are the best stewards of the land, some of the best stewards, I should say, of the land. They protect it. We protect the land, keep close reins on everything, because the cranberries need the pristine Kirkwood Cohansey watershed, for the cranberries itself.
When you talk about supportive land, can you describe a little more what that means? Is that for capturing water?
Yeah, for cranberries, that's what it is. It's for every 1 acre of cranberry, you normally have 10 acres of supportive land behind that for the body of water and just for the protection of encroachment in on the cranberry bogs itself.
Okay.
And, the farms, they are host to a lot of endangered species as well. The timber rattlesnakes, the bald eagles, all those different birds that you just saw in the previous presentation. It's a great lifestyle to be out here in the Pine Barrens. 3 sides of our farm is surrounded by the Wharton State Forest. We're in the northwest quadrant of it, and that you'll see that little carve out just in the northwest quadrant. That is Moore's Meadow, where my family was, and since 1829. And prior to it being Tabernacle Township, it was known as Chemung Township. Wow. As then. And farmers, for being out here protecting the land, they've also been some of the best fire wardens in the area, because you live right out here in it, you're working in it every day, and there's a lot of
necessity, right?
Yeah, a lot of folks have to leave the area to go to work, but the farmers are working in it, living in it every day. Farmers were one of the first ones that developed prescribed fire in the Pine Barrens for protecting the crops and the land itself. Our farm back July 12th of 1954 was ravished by a huge wildfire, a 20,000 acre forest fire that started in Chemung and went all the way to Woodland Township itself. As you can see, just, some of the photos that I've been involved in, with the Forest Fire Service and farming as a whole, that photo right there is the Black Rum Preserve, Apple Pie Fire Tower.
Mhm.
If you go back through my yearbook, you know, everybody said that I've lived my two biggest dreams. I always wanted to be a New Jersey Forest Fire Service fire warden and always wanted to be a blueberry cranberry farmer. And I've had some of the best mentors in the Pine Barrens region around. My father's my number one mentor, and other farmers like Bill Haynes Sr. From Hogwalla, you know, they mentored me to be the person I am today. Like I said, we're very protective of the land. We monitor the land very closely, and it's a, you know, big part of the Pine Barrens. Blueberries and cranberries are native fruit. They used to pick them wild years ago, and then it's developed in and evolved into the commercial operations we have today.
Sure. So I imagine you're quite busy right now working on the farm. What are some things that you, and when do you start working on, does it ever stop really? But when do you start working actively on preparing for harvest for either cranberry or blueberries?
Well, it basically is a year-round job as anybody else has. And sometimes you work 7 days a week, different times. The winter, you can kind of take a little bit of a break. We're all sportsmen, hunters, fishermen, that kind of stuff. So, you know, and you try to grab a vacation if you can to get away for a week or 10 days just to reset the mind a little bit. But during the winter time, we do a lot of barge sanding on the cranberries, where we float an inch of sand down, and that promotes upright growth and upright density to the cranberries. Every 7 years we do it. It's very time consuming, very expensive. We do that during the winter time. And then right now we're just starting to draw the water off the cranberry bogs from the winter flood protection, and we'll put in our solid set irrigation to protect it for frost. A lot of people don't realize out here in the Pine Barrens, it stays very cold. We can have frost in the cranberry bogs anytime from now right up to the second week of June. It's almost on call 24/7 unless it's physically raining or a little bit of cloud cover. You can always have that chance of frost. We've actually had frost here July 2nd and July 4th. You know, where it got to 32 degrees. So then it goes from there, and then you do your normal practices, fertilizing, that kind of stuff. We got our fungicide sprays, insecticide when needed be. We're all IPM, integrated pest management, where we only treat for insects or fungicide when appropriate, and we have to by Rutgers recommendations. And then the blueberries right now, they're coming into flower. Very scary time for blueberry farmers, especially out here in the Pines, because it gets much colder, even from the Hamilton area. You can almost guarantee when they say, you know, it's going to be not 50 degrees, 52 degrees in Center City for a low, you can guarantee the cranberry bogs are going to be, you know, you will have frost or close to frost at 32 degrees, and if not, colder. So, you know, the blueberries are in flower, and, you know, we've had a couple cold nights, and it did get down to 30 degrees yesterday morning, but luckily it was a very short period of time, and the wind was blowing, and the bloom are just starting to open. So they're a little bit more hardy with the frost itself. Frost never settled. The wind kept the temperature a little bit higher. This morning it was close to the freezing mark in the blueberry fields, so we got lucky. We're fertilizing them right now. The bees are in, our honeybees are in for pollination, and so it just never ends. We'll start harvesting blueberries about mid-June, around the 15th of June. It'll go right through the month of July, generally toward like the 20s. We're all early mid-season variety here. We have 40 acres of blueberries. We have Duke and Blue Crop. We have 65 acres of cranberries, and the other 600 and some odd acres is all supportive land, wood watershed itself.
Okay, so when you talked about frost protection, I know that during this time of year you often see the sprinklers going in the cranberry shrubs. Can you describe what that's for?
Yes, what
How do you
happens
put
is
your photo back?
Can we lower the volume background? Thanks. Go ahead.
Yes, what we do is when we take the water off right now for flood protection, and what that does is a lot of folks think cranberries, they have this envision cranberries grow underwater. They don't. When they're dormant, we flood them during the winter from the second week of December right up till now. The cranberry growers are starting to take the water off by like the April 20th to May 1st is kind of like the cutoff at the latest.
Mm.
And what happens is the winter flood protection protects the roots from freeze dry. And if you do get real cold ambient temperatures during the winter, the roots will actually freeze dry. Even though they're dormant, they still need water to absorb in the roots to keep them alive or they'll die. And it also protects the next year's fruit buds. So when we draw the water off around April 20th, then that's when all the frost protection starts and we have solid state irrigation. It's tubing that's put in the bog when it's made or prior to, and it has what they call Webster valve riser that actually goes in and locks the sprinkler in, and we put them in. It's a very, long day carrying buckets of sprinklers across the bogs, putting them in, and, that will protect them from the frost because it encapsulates. Everybody, doesn't understand when they look and they see the ice covering the vines or the fruit. They're like, oh my God, you killed them. No, that actually protected them because ice inside that capsule is 32 degrees. They will take 32 degrees, but if the ambient air temperature drops lower, it will freeze and kill the fruit bud off or the hooks, or what they call craneberry, where you see the danglers of the blossom that looks like a crane's head and neck. That's how it used to be called craneberry years ago, and then it got called cranberry.
Okay, well, that was very well described. Thank you for that. Switching gears a little, what do the Pinelands mean for you? What does it mean for you to be here? I know how much you love this area. We've talked about it.
Yeah, it does mean a lot to me. When you wake up in the morning and you walk outside, most people have to get in their vehicle and they have to travel so many miles to get to work or go to the city or wherever they are. I walk outside and I'm looking right at cranberry bogs 20 feet away from my house. And I just get in the truck, I drive over to our shop and do whatever the day is, the work set up. And in the Pine Barrens, being here, living here, what makes it really special and outstanding is a lot of the folks I have met through the years. As a forest fire warden, I've been proud to be part of the New Jersey Forest Fire Service and still proud. I've been a proud blueberry cranberry farmer. My dad's my best friend and he's my mentor. And my kids, I'm trying to teach them to be the same person I was growing up here, to respect the land, to be who I am, and keep the farm going as long as we can. Farming's not easy. A lot of folks think that, it's great. You just get up and you pick your crops and that's it. But it's a 7-day-a-week job most of the time. And, when you wake up and you look at these cranberry bogs, look at these blueberries, it means a lot to us. And I've got to meet a lot of people from the Forest Fire Service and the farming because they go hand in foot together, to, be around the Pinelands region, like NJCF, PPA, the Pinelands Commission, and all the outstanding folks that just love the Pine Barrens and farming as a whole. When they come out, I'll give some tours occasionally, prior to COVID, people would come out and I love to show the farm off to folks during the harvest season. And it means a lot when you see the crop out there and, get to meet a lot of fantastic individuals and, folks like Ted Gordon, Terry O'Leary. I mean, you can't beat them two outstanding gentlemen of the Pines. They've mentored me as well. And then other cranberry farmers and blueberry farmers.
Mm-hmm. And people help each other out, right?
Absolutely, 100%. The greatest thing about a farmer is farmers look out for each other when in struggling times. This farm back, it was kind of Moore's Meadows, I always said, kind of has like a little bit of an omen, I guess, or superstition, you could say. Because think about it, July 12th, 1940 or 1928, July 12th, Emilio Carranza crashed. Everybody knows Carranza Memorial. July 12th, 1954, 20,000 acre forest fire ravaged this area right here in Carranza. It's just a couple miles through the woods from my house, my doorstep. And there's nothing between my house and Batstow Village, about 12 to 15 miles. Then July 12th, 50 years later, after the big fire, July 12th, 2004, 16 inches of rain fell in a matter of overnight and just pummeled. I'm sure most people around this area remember it, just pummeled the area. And it just took most of our cranberry crop, ruined a lot of our blueberries. And it was a lot of rebuilding and refixing again. And, when you come to times like them, it doesn't affect the whole entire South Jersey or all the farming community. People see when you're in need and need help, especially the farmers, they step up to the plate and they help. We're a big part of our community. I sit on Tabernacle Township Committee. I feel like I'm giving back to the town even more, on helping on the township end of it. And it's great being a farmer, being a Piney. I'm a pure raised Piney. My wife is from Chatsworth. She's a Piney. And my kids are developing into fine young gentlemen Pineys as well. Pineys are some of the hardest working people and some of the smartest people you'll ever see in the Pine Barrens, in my opinion.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Sam.
Thank you.
Always great to talk with you. And so now that is all of our panelists, and we have the ability now to address some questions. We have moderators, Joel and Mariah, who have been fielding questions. So I'll turn it over to them.
Somebody by the name of Paul DeBalo asked, where's the best place to view eagles? So I'm certainly happy to address that.
Sure, thank you.
Each year, there's a Winter Eagle Festival in Cumberland County. So that is an excellent opportunity for an introduction to our eagle population here in New Jersey. That's where some of our largest eagle populations are in Cumberland County, Delaware Bay Shore area. And there's a big festival. I didn't attend last year, of course, because of COVID. I think it was going on in a different format of sorts. But typically, it's an indoor, it's both indoors and outdoors. Indoors, there's lots of outreach tables and people sharing information about eagles, but also lots of other information about nature in the area. And then there's always special speakers. Pat and Clay Sutton are there. If anybody knows them, they are birders as well as native plant enthusiasts. Folks from New Jersey Audubon will come and talk about birds. Folks from New Jersey Conservation Foundation and all over New Jersey come and discuss birds. But then there's also opportunities to meet at different locations within the vicinity to see eagles' nests. So you can actually see the adult eagles, and they have spotting scopes set up. So you can actually look through the spotting scope and see the eagles' nests. And you kind of walk through the woods to get to these different places. And there's other opportunities to see like a great horned owl nest if there's one nearby, or even a flying squirrel nest box. They'll tap on it and the flying squirrels will come out just for educational purposes, just this one time a year. Mm-hmm. But it's quite exciting. So I encourage anyone to Google that, the Cumberland Winter Eagle Festival. And Wells Mills County Park, whom I work for part-time, we actually usually take a van there. So we kind of give you a little, a private ride, and then we take you to the different locations to see the eagles, and you can kind of decide on your own what you want to do throughout the day. So just wanted to answer that question.
Well, thank you very much. I know the eagle population has certainly rebounded in New Jersey, among other places. And I have seen at least 6 already this year. I saw one yesterday. I saw 3 in a row in my neighborhood earlier this year. They're all over the place, it seems, in comparison to before, what was a rare sighting.
Yes, that's very exciting.
Yep.
Hey,
So,
Paul,
yes.
I saw a couple questions I thought were really, really neat
Okay.
that folks asked. Would you like me to answer them?
Sure. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay, I saw the one question asked where we get the, I don't have it up because I'm on my smartphone right now, but one of the questions were, where do we get our water from for the cranberry bogs to flood them for harvest? That's an excellent question. Our water source here for our bogs comes in from the Tom Roberts branch, where we can, divert it into our cranberry bogs through the canal systems and all of that. And the question was, where does it wind up? It winds right back in the same place it come from. Our farm is all the Batstow-Mullica River watershed. Every drop of water that comes out of our farm goes into the Batstow River and passes through Batstow Village and goes out to the Mullica River. So everything that we put in goes right back in the same location again. It's just basically reused is what it is. We do have well systems, 100-foot wells in the ground if needed be. We do have we do have water certification that we have to go through a process that a lot of folks don't realize through the DEP, Bureau of Water Allocation. We're allocated so many gallons of water a year. And as of right now, thank goodness, there's no charge for it or anything like some states do. But we do have to document every time I irrigate. I have flow meters on the pumps, and this all has to be monitored. And I have to give my report at the end of the year to the DEP water allocation on water pumped and diverted in from the infrastructure of the water and through the cranberry bogs. So a lot of water is used in cranberry farming, but it's just put right back out where it came from, where it comes from.
Yeah, and I had heard about this as well. And maybe you could speak to this, that in some cases, cranberry farmers will pass water on down to the next farmer. Is that how that works too sometimes?
That's 100%, because all these farms are based on streams and where water flows. Some people think you can fight gravity, but you can't. Yes, we do it through pumping systems occasionally. And a lot of the same water is used like during cranberry harvest. A lot of times in the fall, cranberries, it can be a very dry time. And what we'll do is, instead of trying to flood an infrastructure of hundreds of acres of cranberry bogs, they'll actually pump it from one bog to the next with Crisafulli system, lift pump systems, to where we reutilize the water over and over and over again. And then, like for irrigation, frost, any of the runoff, it goes right out the ditch through the floodgate or sluice box. I call them floodgates. That's what most piney farmers call them, that we make and put in. And then it flows right back into the downstream. And, for us, it starts off up at the Burgess property above us that Bill Haynes owns now, comes to us in Moore's Meadow, and then goes down to my cousin's property down below, and then back out to the river again. So we kind of all use the same water. One of the other questions I saw was really neat, that people were wondering what the white poles were for sticking out with the strings on them during the winter time. And what they are, they're tundra swan strings. And what happens is tundra swans, geese, and ducks can be very terrible to a cranberry bog. They'll try to feed in it. They'll root their bill around and actually upright all the cranberry bogs. And they make these little potholes all over, and they'll destroy a cranberry bog in a matter of days if you get enough of them. So what happens is, a lot of farmers, if they have a lot of pressure from tundra swans, what we do is we put pipes up. It's in them Webster valve risers I was talking about of the irrigation, and they set up like a crisscross string triangulation, and the swan and geese and ducks can't land in it, or because the strings are too tight, they can't get airborne, they can't land. And so that kind of just is a preventative measure to keep the swan or goose or duck out.
Wow. That is a good question. I've often wondered that as well.
Yes, they're generally put in like late November, right before flooding, and they'll set it up. And just basically the pipe just helps support the string up, and just something that easy stops a total disaster on cranberry bogs.
Mhm. Okay.
Excellent. I switched things up a little bit. Can everybody hear me now?
Yes, perfect. No echoing.
Excellent. I have a question for Ted. And one of the participants wanted to know if people have been able to promulgate some of those species that you were talking about that you've seen in the wild. Maybe are they available for the public? I guess that's what the question is.
Why is that?
Did you say propagate them?
Propagate. Mhm.
Yes.
Sitting here.
Well,
If you click that again, it'll.
there are mixed feelings about propagating species. We try to encourage the growth of native populations and not create separate populations. Although it's been done with some of the extremely rare plants like schwalbea, chaff seed, and we've gotten seed from the south and have successfully been able to grow that. So the same has been done with not bog asphodel so much, but I forgot now. But it's not encouraged because of the rare endangered species regulations. You can't tell the difference from regular native population with a planted one unless you document that. And so it's somewhat frowned upon by the state of New Jersey to do that.
Thank you, Ted. Yeah, that's definitely, I know there's really specific, rules and regulations about seed source and where the seed came, and that's something
Right.
definitely covered by the Pinelands Comprehensive Management Plan. I have a question for John Volpa regarding when you're out in the Pinelands. Is the precautions that you take for maybe ticks and chiggers and some of those other pests that we all run into out there in the woods?
Yeah, son.
Yes, it is one of the challenges of being in the pines, and generally from basically July 1st until first frost, because of chiggers, I don't lead hikes in the pines because the chiggers can be so intense. You can avoid them if you stay on a wide road trail, but if you're on single track and brushing up against the shrubbery, chiggers are definitely an issue, and they seem to love me, and I hate them. Same thing with ticks. So one technique, there's a few things that I do. One I learned from Joel, getting a base layer called bug skins, and we got this through Cabela's, very tightly woven cloth that just chiggers and ticks cannot penetrate it. So I use that, and then I also use permethrin, which is a product you can purchase. Do not put it on your skin. It's to spray on your clothing. You need to let it dry, and then it's good for about 6 washings. That's very effective. So I use that fairly regularly on my outdoor clothing. If you have cats in your house, do not spray it around the cats because it'll affect their nervous system. So I spray my stuff out in the garage so the cats aren't affected. And then, yes, I do, you find something that works well with you, whether it's, some sort of topical spray, just have to find what works for you. But yeah, you have to take all those precautions. Light colored clothing, many people will bring up their socks over their ankles and tape them. Regular tick checks, checking one another. When you get home and you've really been out in the wilderness, use a loofah, take a shower, really try and scrape things off. And whenever my wife and I do get a tick on us, we put it on a piece of paper, write the date, put the date on the calendar, so that in a week or two, if you start to get those flu-like symptoms, hopefully you put two and two together. I have had Lyme's before where you get the bullseye, and bullseye is great. It means go to the doctors, get an antibiotic, but you don't always get the bullseye. So yeah, it's something you very much have to be conscious of. And, it's like anything else. You just take precautions and do your best and try to have some fun.
Great, John. That was a great answer.
That was a good answer, yeah.
Yep. That's part of being in the Pine Barrens is every day, no matter what precautions I take, that's the first thing I do when I get home is I check for ticks, and it's just par for the course. Terry, I have a question for you. We got a question regarding rain gardens and stormwater basins, and is that something that you were familiar with? And do you know of any resources to find out more? I know the Rutgers Co-op has a lot of information, particularly about rain gardens, rain barrels, and I'll send that to you.
Well, the rain garden concept has been around for a while, and Chris Abrupta from Rutgers is now sort of leading the charge. So if you contact, I think you can get him through Becky and the Soil District. They know his number. But anyway, the rain garden concept is you have basins, and I sort of glanced over this. There's retention, which means if you're retained in the fourth grade, you're kept back. The water stays there. You had detention, you're just staying after school, so the water's kept for a while. You have infiltration, where the water is going to go down. Some places, like, for example, the Jacques Cousteau Education Center, the infiltration basin is underneath the gravel parking lot, which is actually clamshells, not gravel. And the water's infiltrated that way. So when we built the rain garden there, we had to build it along the edge of the parking lot, not in the parking lot. But if you look at a basin, every foot of elevation downward, more or less bathymetrically, is a different horizon of planting. So when you have the rain garden, usually you want to make sure there's no invasives in there. Usually they spray rye seed in these things, and rye seed doesn't grow underwater. And you'll see if there's emergent wetlands plants already, like scouring rush or cattails or whatever. And then each horizon, you decide what you can plant that will grow there. A lot of plants don't want to be underwater. Blueberries like damp feet, but they don't like to be flooded. Sammy will tell you that. So we have planted a high bush blueberry there, and in the Pinelands Commission list, they're listed as an obligate wetlands plant. But there's not everywhere in the wetlands that you can grow them. There's some that like wet feet. So, for example, at the Tucker and Seaport, I had to, in order to get our permit, I had to guarantee, like play God, and guarantee that I would eliminate Phragmites, which is no such thing, and that I would create a freshwater wetlands. And the wetlands that was there was created by the Department of Transportation to get the runoff off of Route 9, where there used to be a gas station where now the lighthouse stands. So we ordered cattails, we planted cattails on the edge. We had other wetlands plants that like to be along the edge, like marsh elder and groundsel and even bayberry, and not in the water. And then a higher edge where it was palustrin, scrub shrub, we were able to use bayberry and other plants. So each basin is different. When we were at Berkeley Elementary School, we planted 1,000 Atlantic white cedar, and they have a cedar swamp now because they had the right conditions there. So you had kids who are willing to go in there in the muck, use a planting bar, pry it open, put in the cedar, fill in the hole, and we made them, because we had many hands with children, fill up buckets of mulch and mulch each plant individually to keep away competition from other plants. So each one is its own system. And that's why we work with the Ocean County Soil District. They had many hands to work with our forestry guys and women. And so at the Mates Academy, that was a whole different ballgame. You had sort of enlightened high school students that could function as college students, and they did a great job. In fact, the 1 year, their senior class made it their senior project to construct the, under my guidance basically, but construct the rain garden at the Forest Resource Education Center. So
wow.
You got to get help.
That's great, Terry. It's really neat to see that a lot of those projects are community projects, and kids and the volunteers can all get together and really have an impact. I have another question, particularly for Ted, and we had a few folks wondering about the difference between a vernal and what we have here in the Pine Barrens, the intermittent ponds. If you could just, quickly say some of the differences there.
A true vernal pond only has water in spring. These ponds, these intermittent ponds, which is mostly what we have water any time of year, or they can be without water any time of year. They should not be called vernal ponds. It's really a misnomer, and it's misapplied here. We have very few ponds that have water only in spring. So I encourage you to use the term intermittent pond.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Ted. That was a great way to answer that question. Sam, we've got some questions about your training. Where did you learn and how are you trained to some of the skills and practices for forest fire?
For forest fire, I started, believe it or not, when I was 18 years old with the Forest Fire Service part-time. Most of my ancestors were part of the Forest Fire Service because they worked out in the pines. My great-grandfather was a district fire warden. My father was a district fire warden. A lot of my cousins and relatives were all part of the Forest Fire Service part-time. And how I got involved in it is, I got to know, of course, the fire wardens from growing up here, being here. And I worked my way up through. I got on the crew. I took all my training that was required through the Forest Fire Service. Their federal government courses on wildland firefighting. They're national. I started taking them, got on the crew, got involved, decided, hey, this goes hand in foot with farming. And, it kind of would help me out a little bit, with my life, to have a assured income, because farming can be up and down with finances, everyone well knows, and gives you your health insurance. So I got started. I was in the Lebanon Fire Tower on Route 72 at Brendan Byrne, and I worked in our forest fire maintenance shop. And then I started going for my associate's degree in fire science at Camden County Community College. So I wanted to be a section forest fire warden. And I worked my way up through the ranks, took all the testing through the state that I had to, through civil service. And I took my first area as a section fire warden. As a fire warden, I protected about 100,000 acres of forest, grassland, and private property as a fire warden. And that's how I worked my way up. And I continually took training courses during my full-time career, endless trainings. I have a file of it, and it's was very wonderful to be involved. It was the greatest occupation in the world to ever have.
Ah, awesome. That's really good to hear. I was lucky. I got to do some work with the National Park Service and Forest Service years ago. Yeah. And I got my red card and did a lot of shoveling and a lot of digging. And I have a lot of respect for those out there, fighting fires, because it's a lot of work. It's hard work. And but it's really important, particularly in a place like here, the Pine Barrens, to keep everybody safe. I have a question. I have a question for you, Becky. This might be a hard one. There was a question regarding one of the images, and there was something on your thumb, and I'm just I can't think of the slide right now, so I just wanted to see if you remembered what that was a picture of.
Yes, I do. And can I put you to work, Joel, and ask you to bring up the slideshow? And it's actually maybe in the middle. It's the compilation of all the different wildlife. There's a box turtle in my hand, and it's a gray tree frog on my thumb, and a rabbit, a chipmunk. There's kind of a compilation of wildlife there.
All right, I'll pull that up in a second here.
Sure. And while you're working on that, I'll explain that that little gray tree frog, I actually found that at my office in Forked River, the Ocean County Soil Conservation District. We have the tiniest patch of woodlands behind our office building, adjacent to a huge housing development. But we have this little patch of woods, lots of oak trees there, a couple pines. And as I was taking out the recycling one afternoon, I noticed that there were actually two of these, what I think are gray tree frogs. And it was the first time I ever saw one in real life. And so, of course, I had to take a photo of it. As you can see, it's a teeny tiny little frog, and just a beautiful, beautiful creature. And that is what it is. And then at that time, I got out my notebook and I decided I would start to make a list of all the nature that I found. There it is right there. It's the top third one over to the left, next to the spider, the garden spider. And I don't know, I like lists because maybe I'm a birder, and that's what birders do, is we list our species. But so I just decided to start a little nature journal of all the different species I would find at the office, but I haven't been at the office for about a year now. But we do have some really interesting creatures there, even in the small patch of woodland. So I encourage all of you to start exploring your own backyards, because you really never know what you're going to find in your own backyard. All of these creatures here, that's northern water snake, and up top is a very small box turtle that was in my garden, and that beautiful yellow bird with red streaks on the breast is a male yellow warbler. And somebody had also, I'll answer the same question that I saw in the Q&A. Somebody had asked me how I take such great pictures. I do not take the pictures. My camera takes it for me. I'm not a photographer. I just take pictures. I'm a picture taker. And this is a Canon. It's called a PowerShot SX60HS, and this is called a point and shoot. And believe it or not, this amazing little camera, I just turn it on and you can see it has a really excellent zoom lens. So it zooms in really close. So I get shots of little tiny birds that are far away. And I typically, it has to be a nice sunny day. It does have the bells and whistles. If you are more adventurous than me in terms of technology and want to learn how to actually use the camera, then you have that option. But this camera has done me well. And as birders say, if nowadays anyway, if you don't have a photo of the bird, then you didn't see it. Especially those rare birds. So I got this for rare bird documentation purposes, and it's actually served me well. And one last thing I'll say about taking pictures, coming from the point of view of an environmental educator, taking photos of things you see out in wildlife, out in nature, taking pictures of wildlife really is a great way to start to get to know nature in your backyard. And I promise you, once you see your beautiful photo, you'll be drawn in and you'll want to take another picture of that rare plant or that special bird, or just, the butterfly that flutters by in your backyard. So it's a great gateway drug to nature, this camera here. So I encourage it.
Awesome. Thank you for that. I take a lot of pictures too, and I'm always looking for an edge. So I'll look for that information, because that's good to give me the better shot. I use my cell phone a lot, and they've come a long way, but some days I just want to take that a little bit further. And that's some real good advice. I have one more question for John Volpe, and this is a little bit of a controversial topic, but I wanted to run it by you. When you're out in the field, have you seen an increase or a decrease in some of the off-road vehicle traffic, and is that something that concerns you as it relates to the Pine Barrens?
Well, as I was saying, back in the 70s, we used to be able to drive out in the pines in a Camaro. And I used to take my Volkswagen Jetta on all the sand roads up until the early middle 90s. Once GPS and social media made the pines really accessible to people, then we were getting people from really three states, the Mid-Atlantic. It was being touted as the place to go and kick up dust. And yeah, certainly there have been places that have been heavily impacted. One place in particular that I used to go to is Jemima Mountain. It's on a little ridge, 101 feet. Well, it's no longer 101 feet. I can't even go there anymore because it's heartbreaking to see the damage. And, I certainly don't want to demonize anyone that has an ORV or a Jeep. Just riding on the roads, there should be access for people. But when people go off the roads and, just ride in wetland areas where there are, creatures living there, polluting them, it's just, there are always some unfortunate, irresponsible people. I think there needs to be a conversation about where people can use ORVs in a responsible way. But to have people just go wherever they want because they want to, me first kind of attitude, I don't think that's positive for the environment for the future. And if we really care about the place, yeah, let's have a conversation about how we can all share this 1.1 million acres and be reasonable about what's accessible and what isn't. I know out west people have had that conversation, and there are groups that work together that have ATVs and ORVs, and people can get along as long as you agree to a certain set of rules. If we all love the outdoors, well, let's protect them. And some places just are not conducive to ORV use, and there's been a lot of negative impact.
Right. Thanks, John. Yeah, that's very well said. It is. It's an open area, and we want to work together. And there's room for everybody, but we want to do it in a respectful manner that preserves and protects the Pine Barrens for the future. That really wraps up our questions. One other question we had, that technique John referenced, there's a thing called bug skins. They're also called rhino skins, and it's pretty much like a spandex layer that has really good seams on your sleeves and on your ankles and keeps the ticks and chiggers from getting too far. So I do wear them a lot when I go out in the woods, and they definitely have cut down on ticks over the years. And with that said, I want to thank everybody. This has been a really enjoyable format for me personally. I've learned more than I ever could imagine about the Pine Barrens from the 5 great panelists we had. And I really appreciate Paul's time to moderate, and Stockton and Mariah for, working through this and figuring out a way to have the short course, even though with COVID, things were a little bit limited. At the end of the day, we all love the resource. We love the Pinelands or the Pine Barrens. And this is just the best way we could figure out how to reach everybody in 2021. Stay tuned for the future, and we'll look forward to keep teaching people about the Pine Barrens. And we know the more we learn, the more we love it, the more we ought to protect it and take care of it. And at the end of the day, that's really the bottom line and the goal of all of our education programs. So Ted, Terry, Sam, Becky, and John, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Paul, thank you for doing a great job. And that's all I have to say today.
I think
you,
it's
Joel
been
and Paul.
a privilege to be part of this.
Thank you very much.
Very much so.
Fantastic. Thank you for
Tremendous honor to be with everyone.
Yes. Thank you very much for all you've done for the Pine Barrens. And thank you for being here today, and have a wonderful weekend.
Good to
Thank
see
you,
all
Paul
of
and
you.
Joel.
Happier.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Have a great weekend, everyone.